No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 13. And isn't it wonderful when even the left-wing media speak out against Meghan Markle's egregious and obvious lies? So it may have taken her a couple of years, but the BBC presenter Mishal Husain has today lashed out at the Duchess of Sussex for telling big old fibs about her engagement interview with Prince Harry in her Netflix documentary. I'll bring you the full tea with Angela Levin later in the show. Plus, why did Prince Harry decide to hijack Prince George's 11th birthday? Terrible thing to do to your nephew. And I'll tell you all about how Lady Colin Campbell is raising funds for Thomas Markle on his 80th birthday after he was neglected by his own daughter despite suffering a near fatal stroke. So all the latest royal news coming up with my Royal Mastermind and in our uncancelled after show, which you can register for right now by visiting www.outspoken.live. Also coming up on the show today, an extraordinary revelation that will change the course of the extreme trans debate from Elon Musk, who says his son was killed by the woke mind virus that saw him transition to become a trans woman. I have some very personal reflections on this in my digest next. Then, as Nigel Farage makes his maiden speech in Parliament, is Reform UK about to see more defections from a Conservative Party mired in civil war? And with Kamala Harris stitching up the Democratic nomination in an anti-democratic coup. Yes, there's so much irony there, I know. Is Joe Biden even alive? With all the political latest, I have a perfect guest today. UKIP's first ever MP, the Brexit champion and now president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy, Douglas Carswell, making his Outspoken debut. I'll also tell you why it's so outrageous. I can't believe this, that the BBC continues to pay Gary Lineker £1.3 million, even as 500,000 Brits cancel their licence fee. Remember to hit subscribe right now and on YouTube and Rumble. We need an independent media revolution to tell you the truth, so your support of this channel means everything. And remember to watch 30 minutes of extra content, completely uncensored, every single weekday. You can sign up at outspoken.live, where Angela Levin will be joining me today with her revelations. You do not want to miss that. But for now, let's go. Every now and then, there's an interview with a public figure that's so powerful, so raw, so emotional, so uncensored that it resonates in a manner that actually changes the course of public debate. And overnight, we got one of those moments from Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who proved in 3 gripping minutes that no amount of wealth can take away the pain of losing a child. That child is not physically dead, but lost to Elon all the same. Xavier Musk, now 20 years old, one of Elon's 5 sons with the Canadian author Justine Wilson, is now known as Vivian Jenner Wilson. He transitioned to become a trans female as a teenager in a decision that has left Elon rightly furious with the health authorities and people in positions of power who went through with allowing a healthy young boy to take puberty blockers. Then 2 years ago, he filed court documents in California to legally change his gender to female and lose the Musk family name, stating, "I no longer live with or wish to be related to my biological father in any way, shape, or form." It was this very personal experience that saw Elon want to change the world in more ways than space exploration or electric cars, resulting in his purchase of X, a decision that, thank God, has protected free speech for all of us. So I want to show you the critical part of this extraordinary interview with Jordan Peterson on the Daily Wire, because, well, it just deserves to be seen.
Why are you willing to make this an issue, do you think?
I mean, well, it's sort of like the nameless issue. It happened to one of my older boys, where I was I was essentially tricked into signing documents for one of my older boys, Xavier. This was before I had really any understanding of what was going on, and we had COVID going on, and so there was a lot of confusion. I was told, Xavier might commit suicide if he.
That was a lie right from the outset. No reliable clinician ever believed that. There was never any evidence for that. And also, if there's a higher suicide rate, the reason is because of the underlying depression and anxiety, and not because of the gender dysphoria. And every goddamn clinician knows that too. And they're too cowardly to come out and say it. Right? And so and then we end up in exactly, when I saw that lie start to propagate, it just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It's like, I see. So you're telling parents that unless they agree to this radical transformation, that their children are going to die, and you think that's moral, and you think that's true. That is so pathological that it's almost incomprehensible. I can't imagine anything worse. I can't imagine a therapist doing anything worse than that, or sitting by idly and remaining silent while his colleagues are doing it. It's pathetic.
It's incredibly evil, and I agree with you that people that have been promoting this should go to prison.
It won't stop till that happens.
Yeah.
It'll just go underground. Puberty blockers are being accessed online by kids all the time through non-medical channels. So, yeah, It's not going to stop. Yeah. Okay, so I see. So that's
so I was tricked into doing this, it wasn't explained to me that puberty blockers are actually just sterilization drugs. Anyway, and so I lost my son essentially. They call it dead naming for a reason.
Yeah,
all right. So the reason it's called dead naming is because your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that would be like.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and there's lots of people in that situation now.
Right.
It's not pretty, and lots of demolished kids.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's a good reason to be the final straw. All right, so let's.
So I vowed to destroy the woke mind virus after that.
Wow. That visceral pain struck me, as did the motivation for Elon to change the world being overrun by woke. Sometimes it does feel like X is the final frontier to protect free speech, as the rest of big tech imposes draconian controls on our right to discussion. But what Elon said was very personal to me. I don't usually like talking about this because I think my sexuality as a gay man is pretty much irrelevant to the person I am and my view of the world. It's certainly not something I've ever wanted to be defined by. However, when it comes to extreme trans ideology, it is relevant, and it's imperative that I'm honest about my story. I am so happy to be a man. I have never, ever even considered for one moment that I might have been born in the wrong body despite my same-sex attraction. But as a child, I exhibited many of the signs of vulnerable youngsters who are now put on the horrendous path to gender reassignment. It's called hormones. And it's called children and teenagers working out who they are. The vast majority of the people now being given puberty blockers and encouraged to transition are, and mark my words on this, young gay men and young lesbian women confused about their sexuality. It simply must stop. Just ask Cara Bell, the brilliant woman whose life was destroyed by the Tavistock clinic cutting off her breasts and making her voice go deep forever, when actually she was just confused about her sexuality. So not only do I back everything Elon said, I thank him for being prepared to speak publicly about his own experience as a father. He did lose his son, but hopefully many other parents will avoid the same fate of their beloved kids being killed by the woke mind virus pushing anti-science, anti-human gender ideology. To react now, it's time for the uncancelled interview with Douglas Carswell. And while Douglas is the perfect man to cover the extraordinary political situation in both the UK and the US, he was, of course, you'll remember, UKIP's first ever MP for Clacton, no less, the co-founder of Vote Leave, so a major part in why we were able to break free of the EU shackles. But he is now the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy, and a major new force here on YouTube too, which is very exciting. Douglas describes himself as British-born, Uganda-raised, and America by choice. And Douglas, look, it's so great to have you make your Outspoken debut on what is an extraordinary news day. But first, I'd like to get your response to that Elon Musk interview, because as you can tell, it's very personal to me, this one. But he feels his son Xavier was killed by the woke mind virus. This is going to make a real difference, isn't it, Elon, speaking out like this?
Isn't it extraordinary? I mean, the raw emotion. Here's a man who has, built a fortune, created one game-changing company after another, acquired billions, and yet there he is as a father speaking about his loss. What also struck me about that interview, Dan, is that it's not the mainstream BBC or any organization like that that is touching on these issues. It is, Jordan Peterson creating this extraordinary discussion. It makes me think, that there's something profoundly wrong when the sort of intellectual discussion and debate of the day, the challenging questions about transgender ideology, the discussion about these things is taking place on platforms like this one, like Jordan Peterson's. It tells us quite how brain dead the taxpayer-funded media really is if they're not simply not discussing these sorts of issues. So, I mean, very, very powerful, moving testimony from Elon Musk. And, I hope he's successful. I hope he overturns the woke mind virus that, as he says, killed his son.
And he's already done so much, Douglas, hasn't he, as you point out? Because remember, before he took over X, people were literally being booted off Twitter simply for stating biological realities. Like, I think of people like Graham Linehan and Katie Hopkins. It was censorship on speed.
Musk bought Twitter. You had a handful of tech brats, and there's no other word to describe them, in San Francisco, who thought it was their job to oversee and preside over what was and what wasn't acceptable content on Twitter. And they ludicrously banned people for saying things like, a female has two X chromosomes and a man has an XY chromosome. Thank goodness for Elon Musk. Thank goodness that he is able to allow us to have an open discussion and put the tech brats of San Francisco out of the picture. But I suspect an awful lot of censorship happens on YouTube. I suspect it still happens on Google. I suspect Facebook. I mean, Facebook I think is awash with algorithms that root out unapproved opinions. So thank goodness for Elon Musk. I really hope that he doesn't just put humankind on Mars. I hope he sets humankind free from the woke ideology that seems to afflict us here back on Earth.
Totally, and I would argue that it's just as important, actually. And by the way, TikTok too, which I find utterly hilarious, Douglas, given this is a platform owned effectively by the Chinese Communist government, yet when it operates in the West, it takes on a woke ideology. Completely bizarre.
But Dan, if we've been prevented from saying things like, a woman is a woman and a man is a man, maybe we're also being prevented from saying things like uncontrolled mass immigration from third world countries that aren't culturally compatible with Western values is bad for the West. Maybe we're being prevented from saying things like, a lot of feminist ideology doesn't actually make young women or indeed young men very happy. What else is it that we're being prevented from discussing? I think actually there are an awful lot of things that are just no-go areas in so-called Western open societies. And what we need to do, I think, is begin to challenge the system that basically curates what it is we're allowed to think. Elon Musk has started to do this, but there's an awful lot more of it that we need to challenge. We ought to be able to openly discuss issues that for years the sort of people that run the BBC and CNN wouldn't allow you to discuss. So think of any subject that you're not allowed to talk about freely on the BBC or CNN. Those are the sorts of issues we now need to openly discuss on platforms like Twitter.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And it's why I was so delighted, actually, to discover you on YouTube the other day. And I was watching. I thought it was really excellent. But look, breaking right now, Joe Biden will address the nation and the world from the Oval Office tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern time, where he will be seen in public for the first time since announcing he won't be running for president. So he is alive. But Douglas, this is so bizarre, everything that's been going on. And I want to show you this moment last night where he was calling in to a speech being given by the presumptive nominee Kamala Harris on an answer phone. Watch this.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
And it is my great honor to have Joe's endorsement in this race.
You sure do.
I mean, Douglas, this is bizarre. Utterly bizarre. I mean, do we think Biden, because of his age and because he's clearly not well, has been struck down by COVID far more than most people, or does he actually even have COVID? What do you think's going on?
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I think actually the obvious explanation is the true one. I think an elderly gentleman who should never have been endorsed as the candidate to run a second term has suddenly realized that he's not up to it. A lot of people around him have known this for some time. The media conspired to hide the fact from the American public. It became obvious in the presidential debates a couple of weeks ago that he's simply not up to the job. And he's left his party, the Democrats, in a terrible muddle as a result of this. They're now in a situation where they are having to choose someone pretty quickly. They've got a couple of weeks to formally choose who their candidate is going to be. It looks like it's going to be Kamala Harris. I suspect that actually it's going to be a catastrophe for the Democrat Party if they do run Kamala Harris. They'll go down to a sort of Walter Mondale style defeat. They will lose in states that they haven't lost for 20, 30 years. But frankly, it's a problem of their own making. If you're a party, particularly a party that's called the Democrat Party, you cannot allow a small clique to, in effect, sew these things up, stitch these things up. Yet, they should have had a proper, open, competitive primary contest. There should have been people in the upper echelons of the Democrat Party seriously questioning Biden's fitness to serve a second term. If they'd had this conversation 6 months ago, they could have chosen, today we heard that Jimmy Carter, the former US president, a former Democrat president, has died. Jimmy Carter stands for a tradition of decent, honorable, patriotic Democrats in America. Where's that party gone? If they had this conversation 6 months ago, the Democrats could have found a candidate in the tradition of Jimmy Carter. Instead, they're lumbered with someone who, by Biden's own admission, was only ever given the job because of her immutable characteristics. You could call her a diversity hire. She's way out of her depth. I suspect she'd be way out of her depth in a bath. She's not capable, I think, of communicating effectively or articulating complex ideas. There are a comical series of memes on social media showing just how out of depth she is giving fairly straightforward speeches. But, frankly, the Democrats have only themselves to blame. They should have opened this process up 6 months ago and had an authentic search for a Jimmy Carter type figure. There are good, decent, patriotic Democrats out there. They just don't seem to be running the Democrat Party at the moment.
Douglas, speaking of those memes, I want to show you my favorite compilation of Kamala. And this is comparing Kamala as VP to the fictitious Veep, Selena Meyer, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus on the hilarious HBO series Veep. And unfortunately for the Dems, fiction and reality are pretty close. Have a look at this.
My fellow Americans, words have many meanings, and sometimes instead of conveying our meaning, they can suggest other meanings.
When we talk about the children of the community, they are children of the community.
Well, we are the United States of America because we are united. And we are states.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
Whatever we have in store cannot be known. The past was once the future. The future is, I should say, unknown.
We got to take this stuff seriously as you are, because you have been forced to have to take it seriously.
Obesity is a serious disease, and it needs to be taken seriously.
You need to get to go and need to be able to get where you need to go to do the work and get home.
I hope that clarifies the issue, and this can be the last word on those words.
Certain issues are just settled.
Clearly we're not.
No, that's right, and that's why I do believe that we are living, sadly, in real unsettled times.
I mean, you have to laugh, Douglas, but is that the best the Democrats have got?
She sounds like I do if I wake up and don't have breakfast and my blood sugars are low and I've struggled to put a sentence together. But sadly, this is the best the Democrats can do. It's tragic. It's awful.
Yeah, no, it really is. Look, Douglas, also breaking right now, major news. The Secret Service chief, Kimberly Cheetle, has resigned after the obvious failures that saw Donald Trump almost killed in that assassination attempt. Obviously, this follows what was a catastrophic hearing for her on the Hill yesterday. What do you make of it?
I mean, I think she was in a pretty untenable position. I mean, there was a lot of grandstanding, which I don't think is particularly attractive of politicians who are out to just sort of demonize and vilify her. But putting that aside, I do think clearly her position is pretty untenable. I have to say, I think we need to be a little careful sometimes when talking about what happened. I don't think there were conspiracies. I don't think there was some sort of sinister plot. I think generally speaking, actually, most people who work for the Secret Service are professionals who try to do a difficult job, making split-second decisions. It's very difficult, I think, to do their job properly. I think we need to blame the people who maybe run the Secret Service, but I think some of the comments about what some of the rank and file members of the Secret Service do are just, frankly, a little ill-judged. Mercifully, the assassin did not succeed in killing Trump, although a bystander was killed. Obviously, there needs to be a really clear explanation as to exactly what the circumstances of the assassination attempt were. But I think some of the more outlandish conspiracy theories, I think we need to be a little bit wary of. They don't, there's a willingness when emotions are high to see plots and things. And I'm not sure that some of the conspiracy theories that I've heard over the past few days are really justified. Remember that this is the country that produced, great presidents. This is a country that's produced Ronald Reagan. Love him or hate him, Jimmy Carter was a good, decent president. I think maybe America perhaps needs to slightly take a step back over the events of the past few weeks and recognize that, yep, political passions are high. People feel really strongly about their team. But let's not think the worst of the other people in this country just because they happen to vote differently. America's been through some pretty tricky times. I think in the 1960s, during some of the civil rights riots and protests, people would have thought the country was coming apart. I think America needs a moment of calm. One of the things I hope is that the events of the past couple of weeks might lead some people in the Republican Party and the Democrat Party to recognize that by all means have a fierce presidential debate, but recognize that even Democrats, and if you're a Democrat, even Republicans are good, decent patriots too.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, Douglas, is that if there was no sense of an inside job and there was no conspiracy, as you call it, and actually this was down to incompetence, then I hope this is a massive wake-up call. in the same way that the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan was in 1981, because there was security failure after security failure here. I mean, why on earth was this guy allowed on the roof? Why was Trump allowed out on the stage knowing that there was some form of security threat in the air? Why did the Secret Service allow Trump to stand up and address the crowd? Because that's a big no-no. So I think, look, there needs to be a wake-up call, and thank God this wake-up call is coming with Trump still alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think all that you say is justified and valid. There does need to be an inquiry that asks why was it that the roof wasn't secured? Why were the decisions that were made? But, we also need to recognize that, sometimes mistakes are made. Sometimes things are overlooked. It's not evidence of some murky conspiracy. I think one of the consequences of social media is that if you begin to slightly look for some evidence of some untoward hidden agency behind an event, it's easy to find often fake confirmation of that. And I think that leads people to be far more conspiratorially minded than is good for them, than is good for democracy. So I do just think, let's have an inquiry, put all the facts on the table, but let's do this in a sensible way. Mercifully, Donald Trump wasn't killed, but let's not look for conspiracies where there are none. That's just not good for America. I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if the assassin had killed Donald Trump? I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about. America would be in a major civil crisis. We don't want to turn up the heat on this. Let's remember on the day that Jimmy Carter died, the tradition of being able to disagree with people, but in a respectful way. The country that produced Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan and even Bill Clinton is still here. Politics is important, but it shouldn't be a sort of proxy for religion through which we judge the moral worth of our fellow citizens.
I think one of the problems, though, Douglas, is that the MSM is so driven by complete and utter hatred of Donald Trump. I mean, I'll show you an example here. So in the UK, lots of the big broadcasters, because Trump survived, they seem to think this is all just a big joke. They haven't taken it seriously. So this is the LBC presenter, Sheila Fogarty. It was tracked down by the Guido Fawkes website. Watch this.
All the other channels. How can the right-wing media be very small when Donald Trump only has to put a bandage on his ear to be given world attention? Well, that's true, but that's in general media around the world, and it's generally, ironically, the left-wing media that supports that. But it's the right-wing media that gives him most of his oxygen. Well, it's not written media because they're in America.
I mean, come on, Douglas. He had a bandage on his ear because his ear was shot. And look at that response.
It's more than that, Dan. I mean, Donald Trump has been demonized by the left-wing media for years. And, I think there has to be some recognition that the demonization of Donald Trump has perhaps created the circumstances in which these sort of events unfold. There was some asinine British journalist, I think David Aranovich, who said something incredibly foolish and stupid on Twitter a few months ago. He said
Biden, it was 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks before the assassination attempt. And he said that Joe Biden should murder, his words, Trump, because he was a threat to national security. He later claimed that he was trying to make a joke in regards to the Supreme Court ruling. The BBC took no action against him.
I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly humorous about left-wing journalists demonizing their opponents. It creates a sense that their opponents are not legitimate, and I think that invites all sorts of unpleasantness. We see this in a very microscopic way when Nigel Farage during the general election campaign in my former constituency, Clacton, had a milkshake thrown over him. Now, no one was hurt, nothing particularly serious about that, but nonetheless unpleasant. And believe me, having been a UKIP MP and been on the receiving end of a mob, it can be rather unsettling. So I think perhaps there needs to be some acknowledgement by the left-wing media, the sort of people who spent years sneering and undermining and demonizing UKIP and now have tried to do the same to reform and have in America done something similar to Donald Trump, needs to be some recognition that, you know, they need to take responsibility for the political climate that their demonization attacks create. And perhaps they might want to use this moment to take a step back and recognize that, yes, they personally might not like MAGA, they personally might not wear a red hat, but people who do are good, decent, patriotic Americans. And they shouldn't be demonized for having views that they do about the southern border or about climate change or about the role of the federal government. You know, I speak from the American South, where, you know, there are lots of good, decent people who hold views that are very, very different to the views that you would find in New England or Old England. We shouldn't demonize people for having these views that are different to us. And I think the left-wing media has done an awful lot to create a toxic political culture in the West. And I think now is the time for them to recognize that and take a step back.
Indeed it is. Now, look, you mentioned Nigel Farage. I don't know how to characterize your relationship these days. Maybe your old frenemy. But look, he gave his maiden speech in Parliament in the last couple of hours. Of course, as you say, he's now representing Clacton, which was the constituency you were elected in as the first ever UKIP MP. Of course, you had defected from the Conservative Party, but because you believe in democracy, you stood in a by-election and won, and then you won again there. So I want to talk about what's going on with Nigel, but have a look at his speech today.
What I perhaps didn't expect was to come here and to find that I'm more outnumbered with my reform team, more outnumbered here than we were in the European Parliament, because there are more supporters of Brexit in the European Parliament than I sense there are in this Parliament of 2024. This is very much a Remainers Parliament. I suspect in many cases it's really a Rejoiners Parliament.
He's right about that, isn't he, Douglas? What do you make of the fact that Nigel is now in Parliament as the Reform UK leader in your old seat?
Absolutely delighted. When Sunak called the election, I immediately sent a message to Nigel saying, you've got to run in Clacton, it'll be hilarious. He then hesitated for a while. I was absolutely thrilled when he decided to run, and I did everything I could to support him. I got a lovely message from him in the early hours of the morning on the day of the election saying, you know, Clacton did it. And I said, Clacton did it and you did it. Well done. I'm really thrilled that he's in the House of Commons. And I think he's going to say things that frankly need to be said. The official Conservative Party is so moribund. It's been so taken over by the sort of Osborne Cameroon ascendancy. It's become such a sort of party full of DEI hires, frankly, because a lot of Conservative MPs were only parachuted into safe seats because of their immutable characteristics. That the official Conservative Party is so moribund. It requires an authentic Conservative voice like Nigel Farage, and I think he's going to be really bang on the money on a lot of things. He will be saying the things that need to be said. It's lovely seeing him standing exactly where I used to stand in the Commons and saying these things. And unlike me, when I was UKIP's only member of Parliament, he's got people alongside him from the same party, Reform. And that's, I think, if the official Conservative Party doesn't wake up pretty quickly, I think we'll see a lot more of Nigel, a lot more of Nigel's party, and about time too.
Well, look, I'm delighted that you two are friends again, because actually I think we all need to unite, and Nigel is the obvious person to unite behind when it comes to the right of British politics. But I do wonder, given you had difficult experiences working with Nigel when you were a UKIP MP, whether you share some sympathy for Ben Habib, who was the deputy leader of Reform UK, forced out by Nigel. I mean, is it possible for Nigel to work with others? Because that's going to be really critical, isn't it? Because Reform UK has to become much more than a personality vehicle for Nigel. And by the way, I say this as a former colleague of Nigel, and we never had any issues. We always got on very well, and I loved working with him. But there is a track record, you're one example of it, that it isn't always such smooth sailing.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. I've had differences of opinion over Nigel. I happen to think that actually it was better to have a centre-right coalition that focused on a broad range of issues, spearhead the Vote Leave campaign, rather than some of the characters that Nigel wanted to run the Vote Leave campaign. And I happen to think that I was right on that, and Nigel was wrong on that. We may still disagree on that, but I had differences of opinion with Nigel because I felt that if he did things his way, we would have lost. I think certainly that the way that he fought in South Thanet in the 2015 election, I think the fact that I won and he didn't win in South Thanet, again, it vindicated the approach that I was advocating rather than the approach he was advocating. There've been a number of differences of opinion. But these are tactical differences. On the fundamental issues, I agree with him. And I take my hat off to him because again and again and again, Nigel has had to come out of retirement. Remember, he didn't actually particularly want to stand in this recent election. He's had to come out, reform the band, and force the official Conservatives to do the right thing. And I think whether you, like me, have had differences of opinion with him on certain issues, we've expressed robustly different views on some things. The fact is that Nigel is a guy who's come out of retirement again and again, and by sheer grit and determination has done the right thing for the country. And thank goodness he's done it. Frankly, it reflects very badly on mainstream Conservatives that Nigel has had to keep on coming out of retirement to fix things. Hats off to him, kudos to him. The sheer bravery and determination. He's rather like the Duracell bunny. I don't know if you remember the Duracell ads.
Yes.
He keeps going, and thank goodness he.
And he has remarkable energy. Remarkable energy. Yeah. And actually, on the front of the Daily Express today, he is predicting that there will be more Conservative MPs who defect to reform. Specifically, there's a lot of attention at the moment, Douglas, around the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. And Farage said of her, there's a place for like-minded people, but is that what she wants? I've no idea. It's not my focus.
Hats off to Nigel. I'm talking to you from the United States. The people that carried the Brexit baton during the referendum, Gove and Boris, are nowhere to be seen, having made a catastrophic error of inheriting that campaign and the fruits of that victory. Yet Nigel has carried on, and I won't hear a word against him. I think we owe him some respect for persistence and calling things right.
And so, do you think that folk like Suella Braverman? I mean, look, she's going to try and run in the Conservative leadership contest, right? But actually, Patrick O'Flynn's done a really deep dive into the Conservative MPs in Parliament, and the vast majority of them are part of the sort of one nation woke set who want to go for a centrist leader like Tom Tugendhat, which is just going to be a complete disaster, right, for the party. So do you think if someone like Suella Braverman cannot end up leader of the Conservative Party because the MPs don't put her up for the members to vote on, then actually she would be better served and she would have more chance of success by defecting to reform?
My gut instinct at the moment, and my advice to any Conservative MP watching this, is at the moment the share price of the Conservative Party is so low. Now's actually a good time to invest in the Conservative Party if you can nudge it in the right direction. And that means choosing a leader who's probably not going to be the next Prime Minister, but will be the rebuilder. And if you can invest in a Conservative Party that returns candidate selection back to local people. The original sin of the Cameroons was to, actually there are lots of sins of the Cameroons, but one of the original sins of the Cameroons was to centralize the selection of party candidates. And that basically created the Conservative Party turned itself into a vehicle for unprincipled, ambitious people in the mold of George Osborne to use it as a vehicle for their self-advancement in Westminster. If the Conservative Party chooses a good leader, whether they agree with you on this policy or that policy doesn't really matter. The key thing is that they return to the grassroots, to the ordinary people, to the ordinary folk of Middle England, the power to select their candidates as Conservative candidates. If you did that, you would lay the foundations of a conservative revival. I mean, goodness knows Starmer's going to be one of the most unpopular men in British history in 12 months' time.
Well, I was going to ask you about this because today he's made another crazy decision when it comes to immigration. So we know he's scrapped the Rwanda scheme. Now he's scrapped the Bibi Stockholm barge, which was actually designed to stop putting out these tens of thousands of illegal migrants who are invading the Channel in expensive hotels. So this honeymoon period, it ain't going to last long, is it?
And he's got one of the lunatic Miliband brothers doing his best to deindustrialize Britain by making energy prices price the economy out of global markets. I mean, it's going to end in tears, and they're going to be bitter, bitter tears. What the Conservative Party needs to do, what the Conservative movement needs to do, is offer a credible Conservative alternative. There's going to be a huge, huge, huge opportunity to do that. Starmer's victory may be very broad, but it's incredibly shallow. If the Conservatives can choose a leader who doesn't lay out a manifesto for government, but fixes the defunct Conservative machinery, create a Conservative Party that is a democratic movement that allows ordinary members to choose their candidates in their counties, do that, and I think they will dramatically and rapidly recover against a Starmer government. In a sense, I think the British people are fed up with the Tweedledee and Tweedledum of politics, and the Conservative Party has been the Tweedledee to Labour's Tweedledum. If the Conservatives can choose a leader that creates an alternative to that, then I think they will come back incredibly quickly, and they will flourish and they will thrive. But Suella Braverman, I think, needs to talk to some of her colleagues. Are they serious about that? Or are a bunch of Cameroon-era chancellors going to carry on sinking the ship? We don't know.
I think it's the latter, unfortunately. But look, Douglas Carswell, such a pleasure to have you on Outspoken today. Loving your YouTube channel. I recommend everyone sign up to it as well for real sage analysis of politics on both sides of the Atlantic. And please do come back soon.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much. Now, look, do stand by for our Royal Mastermind Angela Levin. She's up in just 1 minute with this extraordinary story of the BBC presenter Mishal Husain, who conducted Harry and Meghan's engagement interview, calling out the Duchess of Sussex for her lies. Angela Levin, live in 1 minute. But I've only promised to talk to you about products on this show that are actually life-changing. Now, this one, it's a bit more fun, a little bit more personal too, but the fellas watching, you'll completely get it. And if you're watching as a lady, then this is the perfect treat for your husband or boyfriend, which benefits you as well. Because the days of using the same trimmer for your face and the parts below are now over, thanks to our friends at Manscaped. So I've come up with the ultimate package to keep you trimmed from 12 to 6. So I'm going to tell you now about the Beard and Balls bundle, which features the Lawnmower 5.0 and the Beard Hedger. Great names, but not talking about this sort of lawnmower, folks. Because if your man has started to attack himself like an out-of-control lawnmower, you can stop him by getting precision trimming for all areas, even the sensitive ones, and get him as manicured as your freshly cut grass. So I'm talking about a trimmer for the moneymaker, another for the boys downstairs. This trimmer gets it right the first time, being gentle on the skin in all your delicate places. And let me tell you about the technology behind it. It's amazing. 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. You can choose between a precise trim or a smooth finish. And it's waterproof too, so you can trim in the shower. Next, I want to talk about the Beard Hedger. So this is perfect whether you're going for neat stubble or a full-on lumberjack type of look, because it's got a titanium-coated stainless steel T-blade. And this is what I love, 20 length options, which means you can achieve any style you want just by twisting the brilliant zoom wheel. Now, just like the lawnmower, the Beard Hedger is also waterproof, so you can handle your beard grooming right in the sink or shower without worrying about water damage. And with 60 minutes of runtime and an LED charge indicator, you'll never be caught mid-trim. With a dead battery, it's genuinely a gentle product. No more cuts. You'll keep your loved ones very happy and increase your confidence too if it's for you. Really good deal today. 20% off and free shipping. You just have to use the code outspoken.com. Use the code outspoken and do it at manscaped.com. Let me repeat myself. 20% off, free shipping. You use the code outspoken and just type it in at manscaped.com. No more juggling multiple tools or dealing with subpar results. Just efficient, effective grooming wherever you need it. For the premium grooming experience, trust Manscaped. But now, back to the show, and it's time for our Royal Mastermind, Angela Levin. And Angela, we kick off with an extraordinary story today from the usually very mild-mannered BBC presenter Mishal Husain, who has made it completely obvious what we both knew all along. Meghan Markle lied about the claims she made on Netflix about her engagement interview with Prince Harry. So you'll remember in the Netflix series, Meghan Markle tried to say it was some sort of reality show. It was all orchestrated, she said. Well, Mishal Husain has hit back in Saga magazine saying that when the Duchess of Sussex said that my engagement interview with her and Harry was an orchestrated reality show, I didn't know what to make of it. They seem to have thought through what their new lives would be like and what marriage would mean for her life in particular. There was nothing that pointed to what would happen. It was two people who were just full of joy in each other's lives. Now, Meghan had just lied about this, Angela. She had said the interview was rehearsed, and that just wasn't true, was it?
No. I mean, here we have an amazing example of Meghan that actually, if she gets something, she still wants to push it away. If you remember that her wedding cost the Queen £32 million. And she said when she spoke to her interview with Oprah Winfrey that she didn't want anything like that because it was just for all the plebs. She wanted something that was just really important, but nobody else was there. And she said there was Harry, her, and the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Archbishop of Canterbury nearly blew himself out the road because he had to apologise to everybody because it looked as if he'd broken the rules. You can't marry somebody twice in a week. It was 3 days before she said this. You can't marry a couple if they're not people there to sign, and you can't do that unless you're in a place you can do. So she did that already with Oprah. And now when she got, this is before, isn't it? Before, when she had this engagement, which was lovely. I watched it twice, 3 times because I was so happy for Harry. And then she sort of spoils everything because nothing is good enough for her. And if she can attack something, she will. I mean, as you said, Mishal Husain is highly thought of, and she's obviously thought about this for 4 years before she's made a comment about it, and says that it's absolutely not true. And the BBC Director General, Lord Hull, has also said it absolutely isn't true. And you could tell, I mean, I've interviewed loads of people in my journalistic life, and I thought she'd done a lovely job. She seemed to me kind. She asked them how she felt about, living a royal life. And she was so giggly and looking at Harry with these sort of eyes, I adore you, my Harry. It was all so phony. And how she could then say that on the television to Netflix, just so she created something as what a hard deal she had. It's absolutely astonishing that she could do that. And I'm very pleased that Michelle has now done something about it and said it's not true. I don't know what she was talking about. They seemed very happy. She said they looked like they were a couple in love, and that was it. I was asked to do it, and I did it.
Totally.
I think she was obviously furious for ages and now has decided to say something.
Yeah, because what Meghan never thinks about, because she doesn't care about anyone other than herself, Angela, is that these lies actually have a real knock-on effect. Because if Mishal Husain had agreed to rehearse an interview while working for the BBC, she should be sacked from the BBC. That would be a complete dereliction of her journalistic duty. But we know that it simply didn't happen. No BBC journalist rehearses an interview. Now, look, I don't agree with Mishal Husain's politics. I often think on the Today programme she can be very biased when she's interviewing people like Nigel Farage. But I do believe she is a proper, solid journalist who would not do what Meghan suggested. And it's very obvious too. Let's have a look, actually, Angela, at some of the interview because, as you say, she did a very professional job, and I'll get you to react to some more off the back.
Royal Highness Meghan Markle, congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
Can we start with the proposal and the actual moment of your engagement? When did it happen? How did it happen?
It happened a few weeks ago, early this month, here at our cottage. Just a standard, typical night for us.
It's a cosy night. It was, what were we doing? Just roasting chicken
Trying to roast a chicken.
Trying to roast a chicken. And it was just an amazing surprise. It was so sweet and natural and very romantic. He got on one knee.
Of course.
Was it an instant yes from you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I could barely let you finish proposing. I said, can I say yes now?
She didn't even let me finish. She said, can I say yes, can I say yes now? And then there was hugs and I had the ring in my finger and I was like, can I give you the ring? And she goes, oh yes, the ring. So no, it was a really nice moment. It was just the two of us and I think I managed to catch her by surprise as well. So.
Yeah.
And do you know what? The only person lying, Angela, about what happened during the engagement was Meghan Markle herself. Because in the Netflix show, we actually discovered, because she shared the footage, that she had filmed the proposal on her mobile phone. So it wasn't a surprise. It wasn't this great romantic moment when they were cooking chicken like she made out. So it's them who is presenting a completely inaccurate version of the engagement, not Mishal Husain.
Yeah. The interesting thing as well is that it's showing how naive Meghan is that she said she wanted Oprah Winfrey to interview her because she was a friend of hers. She wasn't really at that time, but anyway, this is what she asked for. But can you imagine? You don't do that at the BBC. You don't have American people coming over and interviewing somebody in the UK. You have someone here who is in the UK. It's our excitement. It's our luck to have that. It wouldn't have been Oprah in any way, but see, she doesn't think in the round, does she? I mean, there's lots of comments to say that she doesn't smell the room when she gets there, that she can't make judgments of what the atmosphere is like. But this is another thing. I mean, you don't ask somebody from another country to come over here, and maybe just because she would be a yes woman. But I don't think that's appalling, isn't it, really?
Well, it is, because you're right. Richard Eden, who broke the story in the Daily Mail today, reported that Meghan had complained that Mishal Husain wasn't, quote, empathetic enough, wasn't warm enough to conduct the interview. But as Richard said, Meghan suggests that the attack left her... Mishal suggests that the attack left her bewildered, and far from Meghan being the naive victim of some coordinated establishment plot, she and Harry appeared to have given much thought to what they would say about their plans. And as I say, I just repeat again, it was them who was lying about what happened.
Yes. As I know, I heard from friends that Meghan was quite difficult because she only wanted specific questions. And so she's a sharp cookie and all that. She needs control. She wants to say exactly what she wants, and she doesn't want anyone interrupting. And I thought Mishal did it very nicely. She obviously seemed very pleased for them. And that it was lovely, and it was very sort of lovey-dovey, and she went along with it. It's a terrible thing to say about somebody, actually, because it can ruin their work and how they've behaved for years. And, you know, you might disagree with her with all sorts of reasons, but she did a decent interview and was quite warm, I thought.
Exactly. And as you say, it was Meghan who was difficult because she doesn't believe in journalism, Angela. What she believes in is PR. And paid PR. So she expects copy approval. She expects to read the questions beforehand. She expects to only be interviewed by her friends. And Mishal Husain was not going to provide the questions beforehand. She was not going to rehearse. And it feels like Meghan, even though actually Mishal Husain did a nice job, Meghan is just out to destroy this woman. And it's insane. It's utterly insane. But look,
she likes to knock people on the head that they're never good enough. She's one of these women, I'm afraid. There are not many of us, but there's one of the things that nothing is ever good enough. And I think Meghan has proved that to us over the 4 years that we've known her. And it's now coming back against her. People are fed up with it. She's not a victim. She pretends she's a victim, but she's not.
No, I think that's a very fair point. Now, this is also really terrible, Angela. Prince Harry upstaged young Prince George's lovely birthday release of those pictures by Catherine Middleton by announcing on the same day that the Invictus Games are going to be held in Birmingham in 2027. And look, I'm sure Catherine and William weren't worried about this, but it does just show you how pathetic Harry is, isn't it? It's like he knew it was George's birthday. He knew the picture was going to be released. It's taken by Catherine. He wants to steal the thunder with his Invictus Games announcement. It's just pathetic game playing yet again.
Well, it's such a shame. I think Meghan likes to do that. We've seen that so many times. Every time the royal family, as we know it, do something, she has to do something just before, an hour before, or just as it's happening. And it's all carefully controlled. I mean, I've been told several times that she knows exactly what she's doing. It's not a mistake. She's very cautious. So she's doing that. And Harry, I suppose, was told this is what he had to do. And so he did it. I'm surprised it's come to Birmingham because they're very short of money. And nowadays in Invictus Games, Harry and Meghan ask her for quite a lot of money for Meghan's clothes, hotels that they stay in. Sometimes they want them redecorated and new bed wear put for them, and eating. They can eat very expensive restaurants. And the Invictus Games is having a very, very hard deal with how much money they've got. I think they're £30 million short at the moment. I mean, it's a long way to 2027, but nonetheless, it's no longer the same thing. A lot of people don't like
it. And it feels like they're in I was just going to say, it feels like they're in a bit of crisis at the moment, Angela, because Dominic Reid, who was the chief executive of the Invictus Games, has announced that he is quitting. Now, this could maybe have something to do with Harry accepting the Pat Tillman award against the wishes of Pat Tillman, even though I know they both released very lovey-dovey statements about each other. What do you think's going on with this departure? Because it's yet another senior figure in Prince Harry's life walking away from him.
I haven't found out exactly yet. I hope I don't have to wait 4 years as I found out about Meghan. But he's been working there for 10 years, and he's been absolutely Harry's right hand. He's done masses of work and good ideas. It is unusual for someone to leave just before something is coming up in the Winter Olympic Games, Invictus Games, and it could easily be that he just decided that was a short straw, but we don't actually know that. He might have got another job offer and decided to do it, but I think if he was really keen still on it, he would have stayed for a bit longer so that it wouldn't make things very difficult, because to have somebody new in, you've got to teach them, and it's very hard for them to work out exactly what's going, especially with people like Harry and Meghan. And a lot of them don't like it anymore because it's too much about Harry and Meghan. Meghan gives the speeches, Meghan wants to be in front of marching, and I think people don't like it anymore. It's lost its real feeling of need and working together because they're secondary to Harry and Meghan.
Yes,
the victims are secretaries.
Exactly. It's all about pushing Harry and Meghan because this is the only thing that remains in their orbit that's actually at all successful. But Angela, look, I want to talk to you about this incredible GoFundMe that has been set up by Lady Colin Campbell for Thomas Markle Sr. Now, he turned 80 this week, and I really want to stress, I've spoken to Lady C about this. This was not something that anyone in the Markle family asked her to do. She did it completely off her own back. And she's explained why by saying, many people have suggested that I spearhead this fundraiser to meaningfully note Thomas Markle Sr.'s 80th birthday. He has been exceedingly time and money over the years, as I have learnt from the teachers at his daughter's school, who could not sing his praises highly enough. His kindness and generosity are well known in the film community, and I agree that now he has been rejected and abandoned by the daughter, those of us who wish to show him solidarity and give him the acknowledgement he should be getting from the actual recipient of his largesse will hopefully, through our contributions, no matter how small, demonstrate to him that there are still good people in the world with good hearts, good values and good intentions. Hopefully our actions provide him with the comfort he deserves in more ways than one in his declining days. And already something like, £3,000 or maybe even more by now has been raised in just 24 hours. It's got a £10,000 target. And of course, Angela, Thomas Markle paid entirely for Meghan's education. He raised her through all of her teenage years, yet now, in his hour of need, when he does require very expensive medical care because he suffered from this life-threatening stroke, his daughter is nowhere to be seen.
It's very, very sad indeed. I think 80 is an extraordinary age to get to, and you are still okay-ish, but you're also getting old, and you want to be loved and you can't do so much, so you rely on the people who are part of your family, if you have a family. And he adored Meghan, and you can see from all the photographs that we've seen going back that she adored him. She was always cuddling him and having a very nice time, and she owes a lot to him. But again, Meghan wants to destroy these things. I don't know why she actually wanted to destroy him before the wedding, but nonetheless, that she can't somehow see him and let him see his grandchildren. I would imagine that even though he thought it was very unlikely, he longed to hear from her, and he longed perhaps to hear a little child saying, "Happy birthday, Grandpa." That would do it in a way, if he couldn't get her there. And I think it's extremely cruel not to pretend he's not there. Very, very cruel indeed.
No, it really is. Now, look, we'll have much more royal news at our uncancelled after show shortly with Angela. Sign up to watch at www.outspoken.live. But Angela, before we head to the after show, we need to talk about the British bashing corporation, the BBC, which has released its annual report today showing its top 10 earners. And I mean, goodness me, look at that. £1.3 million to Gary Lineker, a bloke who uses his job at the BBC to push a hard left political philosophy. I just think it's utterly appalling, actually. And meanwhile, Angela, we learn that 500,000 people have actually cancelled their BBC licence fee altogether this year as they decide to move to services like Netflix and, where we are right now, YouTube. So isn't this appalling that they continue to pay someone like Gary Lineker all of that money?
Well, somehow they seem to be scared of him. They seem scared of him if he makes a comment about the Middle East. They're scared of him if he makes a comment about a TV thing. He seems to have them wrapped around his little finger, and he couldn't care less. I mean, he is who he is, and he sort of outbehaves them, I suppose, is a strange word. And they have to do what he says, and he's not interested. I mean, Zoe Ball, who doesn't have the same personality, I mean, she's got 950,000. It is absolutely ridiculous. But the trouble is, once you've given people the money, it's very hard to actually cut it in half or cut it in a quarter off it. It just doesn't work because people get all sulky and feel they want to go. I mean, I've read that Gary Lineker was trying to get on to ITV and he'd got it all sorted out. When he was actually planning to go, they said they didn't want him. And I imagine that one reason was that they weren't prepared to give him more than £1.3 million.
It's just ludicrous. No one is worth that money for an organisation like the BBC, which is broken and failing. Also, Angela, we spoke about this last week, but the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, has now addressed the controversy surrounding Strictly Come Dancing. Now, he says the organisation will never tolerate unacceptable behaviour and the line should never be crossed. But he did say there's always a degree of competitiveness alongside the fun, but there are limits. And he did also issue an apology saying, I'm very sorry that anyone has had an experience on Strictly that hasn't been wholly positive. So what do you make of this, Angela? Do we trust what he's saying here? Is there a bigger scandal waiting to come out about Strictly Come Dancing?
Well, as we sort of touched on last week, I find it this is very hard to understand. If you're a grown-up woman and somebody behaves very badly, you can storm out. You just say, I'm not having anything to do with this. I'm off. I don't think that you stay quiet for years. I mean, this is going back quite some time. I think women have got to look after themselves. But none of us are babies over a certain age. And unless you see they're desperate to be on television, I think that's the trouble. They really want to, and they really want to dance brilliantly, but they don't know how. And the people who are trying to teach them can get very angry that if they're hopeless, if you're not at all good, you haven't got the rhythm in your blood, then you can annoy the person who's trying to teach you. And I think that's very difficult. And they can shout because they're tired and they're working hours. Obviously, it's not a good thing to happen, and I'm not saying, don't take any notice of it. But I think it's very important that women decide what they think for themselves, and they don't have to succumb to very bad behaviour.
Yeah, indeed. I'm with you on that one, but I think there is probably going to be much more on this story because people are wanting money. These people are wanting moolah, big bucks, and they think actually that they can sue over it. I actually hate all of the offence archaeology. Something happened in your life years ago. Deal with it then. Deal with it then. Don't do it years and years later when all of a sudden lawyers are promising you big bucks. But look, Angela, stand by because we have so much more from you, including big royal exclusives in our safe space, not patrolled by big tech. It is the Uncancelled After Show. And you can sign up right now and join Angela and I in just 1 minute time at www.outspoken.live. And actually, you get extra content, an extra half hour of content every single day. So right now, we're going to come off YouTube. We're going to come off Rumble. We're going to move to our own platform. And all you have to do to get there is sign up to www.outspoken.live. Remember, we're back every single weekday at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Please do hit subscribe right now if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. Turn on the notifications too. You've just got to click the bell for that because then you'll be alerted about our new live episodes and our new content whenever it becomes available. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. See you on the after show with